My name is Sarah, I'm 34 years old, and for the last 7 years, I've lived in a charming, if slightly too small, bungalow in Austin, Texas. I'm a freelance graphic designer, which is a polite way of saying I work from a corner of my living room, fueled by coffee and the constant gnawing pressure of deadlines. My husband, Tom, is a good man, a kind man, but he has a blind spot the size of the Lone Star State itself. That blind spot has a name, Eleanor, his mother. For as long as I've known Tom, Eleanor has been the ghost at the feast, the faint, sour note in an otherwise happy song. She's a woman who speaks in honey-laced barbs and performs acts of kindness that leave you feeling like you've been subtly mugged. I've spent 7 years perfecting the art of the placid smile of the gentle, deflecting response. I've hosted holiday dinners where she's helpfully pointed out every speck of dust. I've accepted backhanded compliments about my career, my cooking, my clothes. It's so brave of you to wear something so bold, Sarah. I could never pull that off. I've been the bigger person so many times. I feel stretched thin, a version of myself I no longer recognize, all to keep the peace for Tom. But 2 weeks ago, the peace shattered. It wasn't a dramatic, explosive confrontation. It was quieter and far more devastating. The phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon. I was wrestling with a logo design for a new client, a trendy farm-to-table restaurant. The kind of client I'd been dreaming of. This project was a big deal. It was the final piece of a portfolio I was submitting for a competition with a prize that could elevate my business from a side hustle to a real, sustainable career. I'd been working on it for weeks, sacrificing sleep, pouring every ounce of my creativity into it. It was Amy, Tom's sister. Her voice was trembling. "Sarah, I don't know how to tell you this." I leaned back, the half-finished logo blurring on my screen. "Amy, what's wrong? Is it your mom?" It was always her mom. She came over this morning," Amy stammered, the words catching in her throat. "She was helping me clear out some of Dad's old things from the attic. Your portfolio was up there." My blood ran cold. What? Why was it in the attic? I had given the portfolio, a pristine leather-bound case containing all my original design proofs, to Tom to store in his old childhood bedroom. It was supposed to be safe. He'd promised. His mother's house was larger, and he'd argued that the attic was dry and secure, a perfect place to keep it. "She thought it was just old art supplies," Amy said, her voice cracking. "There was a leak in the roof from that big storm last week, a small one, but it was directly over the box. Sarah, it's ruined. The water, the dust." She said she just threw the whole soggy mess out this morning. She didn't even look inside. She just threw it away. I stared at the wall, at the framed photo of Tom and me on our wedding day, both of us beaming. Threw it away, my work, my sleepless nights, my one big shot, all tossed in the trash like a bag of rotting vegetables. She didn't know. Eleanor, who had asked me a dozen times what was in that special case. Who knew exactly how important that competition was to me? Who had once, accidentally, spilled red wine on my portfolio during a family dinner, an incident I had foolishly written off as a clumsy mistake. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," Amy whispered. I didn't answer. I couldn't. A strange calm washed over me. It wasn't shock. It wasn't even rage, not yet. It was the chilling, clarifying moment when you finally see someone for exactly who they are. The ground beneath me didn't just crack. It fell away completely, leaving me standing on the edge of a precipice. And in that terrifying, silent freefall, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was done. Done being the bigger person. Done smiling through the pain. Done sacrificing my own dreams to soothe the ego of a woman who saw my success not as something to celebrate, but as a threat to be neutralized. I ended the call without a word. I picked up my car keys, my movements slow and deliberate. As I walked out the door, I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. But I knew that Eleanor had just started a war. She just didn't realize that this time I was going to fight back, and I wasn't going to play by her rules anymore. I drove. Not to Eleanor's house with its perfectly manicured lawn and its suffocating atmosphere of passive aggression. A confrontation was what she would expect. She would be waiting, armed with a performance of tearful apologies and bewildered innocence. "Oh, Sarah, my dear, I had no idea. If I had only known, I would have..." She would twist it somehow to be my fault for leaving it there. for not reminding her, for having dreams that were, apparently, an inconvenience. No, I didn't give her the satisfaction. I just drove through the sunny Austin streets, the vibrant murals and bustling sidewalks a stark contrast to the glacial calm in my chest. With every mile, a reel of memories played in my mind, each one a small cut, a tiny paper cut that I had ignored until I was bleeding out. There was the time she lost the reservation for my 30th birthday dinner, leaving us to scramble for a table at a generic chain restaurant. The time she'd gifted me a subscription to a weight loss program for Christmas in front of the entire family, patting my arm and saying, "Just a little something to help you feel your best, dear." There was the constant, insidious campaign to convince Tom that my freelance career was a cute hobby and that I should get a real job with benefits to better support her son. Each memory was a brick in the wall she had built between us, a wall I had repeatedly tried to dismantle with kindness, with patience, with understanding. Now I saw it for what it was, not a misunderstanding, but a fortress. And you don't reason with a fortress. You find its weaknesses. You undermine its foundations. I pulled into the parking lot of a small, independent coffee shop miles away from my neighborhood, a place with no memories attached. I ordered a black coffee, my hands perfectly steady. I sat at a small table in the corner, took out my phone, and opened my calendar and my banking app. For years, I had been the silent, unacknowledged manager of our extended family's life. My reward was being treated like the help. Well, the help was officially giving her notice. Eleanor's 65th birthday was in 3 months, a milestone. For the past year, she had been dropping hints. No, not hints. Delivering pronouncements about her dream party. A lavish, catered affair in the ballroom of a historic downtown hotel. She envisioned a string quartet, a 5-course meal, and all of her friends gathered to toast her magnificence. She didn't have the money for it, of course. She had a knack for developing expensive tastes right around the time Tom's annual bonus was due. Tom and I had discussed it. He had wanted to throw her the party of her dreams. "She deserves it, Sarah," he'd said, and I, in my well-practiced role as the supportive wife, had agreed. We had earmarked a significant portion of our savings, money that I had meticulously managed and grown, for the event. The deposit for the hotel was due at the end of the week, a non-refundable $10,000. I looked at the saved quote from the event planner on my phone. Then I looked at the balance of our joint savings account. My savings, my earnings from countless late nights, money that was supposed to be for our future, for a down payment on a bigger house, for a vacation that wasn't to visit his family. My plan began to form, not in a rush of anger, but with the quiet, methodical precision of a designer creating a blueprint. This wasn't going to be a loud, messy act of revenge. It was going to be a masterpiece of strategic incompetence, an unraveling of support so subtle, so plausibly deniable, that by the time Eleanor realized what was happening, she would be standing in the ruins of her own expectations. I was the family's social secretary. I organized the birthdays, bought the presents, sent the cards, made the reservations. I was the keeper of the calendar. My labor was invisible, but without it, the entire social structure of the family would collapse. It was time to let it collapse. I took a slow sip of my coffee. It was bitter and strong. For the first time in a long time, so was I. The first step was simple. I would not pay the deposit for the hotel. I wouldn't mention it. I would let the deadline pass in utter silence. When Tom asked, and he would, I'd feign forgetfulness. Oh my gosh, with this portfolio disaster, it completely slipped my mind. The portfolio she destroyed would be the perfect cover for my newfound unreliability. This wasn't just about the party. It was about everything. It was about withdrawing my unpaid, unappreciated labor from every corner of her life. The revenge wasn't going to be in what I did, but in everything I was no longer going to do. She wanted to erase my work? Fine. I would erase mine from her life and watch as she slowly realized how much she had relied on it. I went home that evening and played the part of the devastated artist. When Tom walked in, his face etched with concern, I let the tears come. They weren't entirely fake. The grief for my lost work was real, a sharp, aching void. But mingled with it now was a new, cold resolve that felt like steel in my spine. "Amy told me," he said, wrapping his arms around me. "I am so sorry, honey. I'm going to call Mom. She's going to feel absolutely terrible." "No," I said, my voice muffled against his chest. Don't. Please, I can't talk to her right now. I can't even think about it. It was the perfect excuse. My grief was now a shield. He held me tighter. Okay, whatever you need. He had no idea that what I needed was for him to finally see his mother clearly. But I knew I couldn't tell him. I had to show him. A week passed. The deadline for the hotel deposit came and went. I spent my days meticulously recreating my lost work from digital drafts and old sketches. It was a Herculean task, but with every design I salvaged, I felt a piece of myself being reclaimed. I was no longer just Tom's wife or Eleanor's punching bag. I was a designer, I was an artist, and my work mattered. On Friday night, Tom was scrolling through his emails. "Hey," he said casually, "did you get a chance to pay the deposit for the ballroom for Mom's party?" I looked up from my laptop, my face a carefully constructed mask of dawning horror. I let my jaw drop. "Oh my God," I whispered, pressing my fingers to my lips. "Tom." "No." "What?" he asked, his brow furrowed. With everything that happened with the portfolio, I completely forgot. It completely left my head." I buried my face in my hands, a gesture of pure, believable despair. "The deadline was today, wasn't it?" He paled. Yeah, crap." He immediately started looking up the hotel's number. For the next 10 minutes, he was on the phone, his voice growing more and more frustrated. I just sat there sipping my tea, watching the show. "They gave the date away," he said, finally hanging up. "They had a wait list. It's gone. The whole month is booked solid." "Oh, Tom, I am so sorry," I said, my voice thick with feigned guilt. "I feel awful. Your mom is going to be devastated." "It's not your fault," he said, running a hand through his hair. "You've been through hell this week. I should have reminded you. I'll call her. I'll figure something else out." He walked into the other room to call Eleanor, and I allowed myself a small, grim smile. The first brick had been pulled from the foundation. The next phase of my plan was even more subtle. I was the family's IT support, social coordinator, and personal shopper, all rolled into one. That had to stop. 2 days later, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Eleanor. "Sarah, dear, my iPad is making a funny noise again. Can you pop over and fix it? And could you pick up my special face cream on your way? You know the one." For 7 years, I would have sighed, rearranged my schedule, and done it. Today, I simply replied, "So sorry, Eleanor. I'm swamped with work trying to recreate my portfolio. You could try the tech support number on the back of the iPad. I think Tom has the details for the cream you like." Silence. An hour later, a text from Tom. "Hey, Mom's having trouble with her iPad. Can you give her a call?" My reply was immediate. "Can't. I'm on a deadline. Maybe you could walk her through it after work." That evening, Tom spent a full, frustrating hour on the phone with his mother, trying to explain the concept of a reboot to a woman who treated technology like a malevolent, unknowable force. I put on my noise-canceling headphones, played my favorite music, and kept on working. It was glorious. A week later was Amy's birthday. Every year, I was the one who organized the family gift. I'd spend hours finding the perfect thing, collecting money from Tom and Eleanor, wrapping it, and writing a heartfelt card signed by all of us. This year, I did nothing. The day before her birthday, Tom asked, "Hey, what did we end up getting Amy?" I looked up, all innocence. "Oh, I didn't organize it this year. I figured you and your mom had it covered." The look of panic on his face was immensely satisfying. He and Eleanor ended up scrambling to send a last-minute impersonal gift card via email. Amy called me later, not angry, just confused. "Mom sent me a gift card for a hardware store," she said, bewildered. "Did you know about this?" "I had no idea," I said truthfully. "I've been so out of it, I left it to them this year." Each small act of strategic withdrawal was another thread pulled, another support beam removed. Eleanor's world, so carefully propped up by my invisible labor, was beginning to wobble. She was being forced to do things for herself, to rely on her son for the emotional and practical support she had always outsourced to me, and she did not like it one bit. The calls and texts became more frequent, tinged with a new, sharp edge of irritation. But for the first time, the irritation wasn't directed at me. It was directed at a world that was suddenly, inexplicably, not bending to her will. The weeks leading up to Eleanor's birthday were a masterclass in controlled chaos. Having failed to secure another grand venue on such short notice, she had been forced to downgrade her expectations significantly. The lavish ballroom party had morphed into a frantic, last-minute plan for a small gathering at her own house. And without my logistical support, the planning was a disaster. She called Tom constantly, complaining that the caterer she wanted was booked, that the bakery couldn't make her preferred cake, that no one was helping her. Tom, stressed and pulled in a dozen directions, would come home with a weary sigh. "Mom's really struggling with this party," he'd say. I would just nod sympathetically, offering a placid, "I'm sure it's a lot to handle." I offered no solutions. I provided no help. I simply let her lie in the bed she had made. The breaking point came on a Thursday night, 1 week before the non-gala. The doorbell rang, a sharp, insistent peal that cut through the quiet evening. I knew who it was before I even saw her. Eleanor stood on our porch, her face a thundercloud. She wasn't playing the part of the sweet, befuddled matriarch tonight. She brushed past me before I could even speak, her eyes scanning our living room like a hawk searching for prey. Tom got up from the couch, surprised. "Mom? What's going on?" "I'll tell you what's going on, Thomas," she said, her voice trembling with rage. She whirled around to face me, her finger jabbing the air. "She is what's going on. Your wife." I leaned against the doorframe, my arms crossed. I felt strangely calm, like a meteorologist who has been predicting a hurricane for weeks and is finally watching it make landfall. "She has done everything in her power to ruin my birthday," Eleanor spat, her voice rising. "Ever since her little art project got damaged, she's been punishing me, intentionally forgetting to book the hotel, refusing to help me with my iPad, letting me flounder with the party plans. She even turned Amy against me." Tom looked from his mother to me, his expression confused. "Mom, that's not fair. Sarah's been devastated about her portfolio, and she didn't forget the hotel on purpose. It was an accident." "An accident?" Eleanor let out a short, sharp laugh devoid of any humor. "Don't be naive, Thomas. There are no accidents with her. This is what she does. She manipulates. She plays the victim while quietly sabotaging everything. She has never thought I was good enough for you, and this is her pathetic, petty revenge." It was the moment of truth, the moment where, for 7 years, I would have rushed in to smooth things over. I would have defended myself, placated her, reassured Tom. I would have managed her emotions and absorbed her venom to keep the peace. Not this time. I stayed silent. I let her accusations hang in the air, ugly and toxic. I watched my husband. I saw the conflict in his eyes, the ingrained instinct to defend his mother warring with the woman he loved. And I knew that if I spoke to defend myself, he would retreat into the familiar pattern of asking me to be the bigger person. So I let him see. I let him truly see her, raw and unfiltered. "She's jealous," Eleanor continued, her voice growing shrill. "Jealous of my relationship with my son. She wants to cut me out, leave me with nothing." Finally, Tom spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "Mom, stop. You're upset. Let's all just calm down." "I will not calm down," she shrieked. "Not until she admits what she's done." I pushed off from the doorframe and took a step forward. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I spoke with the chilling clarity of someone who had nothing left to lose. "You're right about one thing, Eleanor," I said. "It wasn't an accident." Tom stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. Eleanor looked momentarily triumphant. I didn't forget to pay the deposit," I continued, my eyes locked on hers. "I chose not to pay it. I chose not to fix your iPad. I chose not to organize the gifts or the parties or any of it anymore. You see, for 7 years, I have been your unpaid assistant, your tech support, your social secretary, and your emotional punching bag. My payment for these services was condescension, backhanded compliments, and a systematic attempt to undermine my marriage and my career." I took another step. "You say I'm punishing you for my little art project? Let's be clear. You didn't just damage a project. You deliberately destroyed years of my work, my one real shot at a dream I've had since before I even met your son. You did it because you cannot stand to see me succeed. You did it, and you lied about it. And in that moment, you taught me a valuable lesson. You taught me that my presence in your life, my effort, my love, it was all negotiable. So I renegotiated my terms." I turned to Tom, whose face was pale with dawning horror and understanding. I didn't tell you because I needed you to see this for yourself. I needed you to see the person I see when you're not looking." Eleanor stood there, speechless, her rage deflating into stunned silence. She had expected tears, denials, a fight she could win. She was not prepared for the truth. "Get out of my house, Eleanor," I said, my voice as quiet as a whisper, but as sharp as glass. She looked at Tom, her eyes pleading, expecting him to rush to her defense. For a long, agonizing moment, he stood frozen between us. Then he looked at his mother, but his eyes were different. The blind spot was gone. He saw her. He took a deep breath and said, "You should go, Mom." That was it. The storm had broken. The foundation hadn't just cracked, it had crumbled into dust. Eleanor stared at her son, her face contorting in disbelief and betrayal, before turning on her heel and stalking out, slamming the door behind her. The silence she left behind was profound. It wasn't empty. It was filled with the rubble of the old world and the quiet, clean air of a new one. After the door slammed shut behind Eleanor, the silence in our living room was deafening. I expected an argument, or at least a tense debrief. Instead, Tom just sank onto the couch, looking at the empty space where his mother had stood, as if he were seeing a ghost. He finally turned to me, his eyes filled with a kind of sorrow I hadn't seen before. "Sarah," he said, his voice raspy, "I am so sorry." It was more than an apology for the evening. It was an apology for the 7 years of placating, of not seeing, of asking me to absorb the blows he should have been deflecting. It was the apology I had stopped waiting for. You have every right to be angry with me," he continued. "I let you handle her because it was easier. I didn't want to see it, so I let you carry it. That wasn't fair, and it stops now. This is my mom, and she is my responsibility." In that moment, I knew our marriage wasn't just going to survive, it was going to be reborn, built on a new, more honest foundation. We talked for hours, really talked, for the first time in years. I didn't have to translate my feelings or soften the edges. He just listened. He understood. Eleanor's party was a subdued, awkward affair that we did not attend. Amy told me later that half the guests canceled, and the atmosphere was thick with tension. Eleanor apparently spent the entire time complaining about her ungrateful children. It was the last family event governed by her rules. The months that followed were a revelation. Free from the constant low-grade stress of managing Eleanor, a huge space opened up in my life. A space for me. I poured all that reclaimed energy into my work. I not only recreated my portfolio, but I made it better, bolder, more authentically me. I submitted it to the competition, not with desperate hope, but with a quiet confidence I hadn't felt in years. I didn't win the grand prize. But one of the judges, a creative director at a major Austin advertising agency, saw my work. She called me a week later. She didn't just offer me a project, she offered me a partnership, a chance to be the lead designer for one of their biggest new clients. Today, I'm not working from a corner of my living room anymore. I'm standing in my own studio, a bright, airy space downtown with huge windows that look out over the city. The smell of fresh paint still lingers. Tom and I are a team now. In a way we never were before. He handles all communication with his mother, which is now infrequent and brief. The new rule is simple. Our peace is not up for negotiation. I've learned that revenge isn't always a fiery explosion. Sometimes it's the quiet, steady act of taking your power back. It's refusing to be a character in someone else's drama. It's the profound, unshakable peace that comes when you stop setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Eleanor wanted to destroy my career, to shrink my world down to the size of her approval. Instead, she gave me the greatest gift I could have asked for. She set me free.